In the book titled How Women Rise by Sally Helgeson and Marshall Goldsmith, the authors describe the 12 habits that hold women back from their next raise, promotion, or job. My guest today, MJ O'Leary, recognized these habits in women and realized that sometimes the most important glass ceilings that need to be shattered are our own. This epiphany led her and her business partner, Marcia Gordon, to create a company called SHATTR, whose mission is to unleash the full potential of female leaders by uplifting, elevating, and inspiring women to thrive in their leadership journey. Get ready for an inspiring episode that will help you overcome imposter syndrome, gain confidence in your abilities, and tune into your unique talents. This is E3. Engage and empower with empathy. Welcome to the show today, MJ. It's really nice to have you here. How are you doing today?
Great. I've actually really been looking forward to this conversation. So thank you for inviting me to be with you today.
No, it's my pleasure, and the feeling is mutual. In fact, I even got out the How Women Rise book in anticipation of our conversation today. We'll be talking a lot about this because I think the work that you do really supports a lot of the habits that are mentioned in this book that keep women from really rising to the top. It's a book that I've kept has a permanent place on my bookshelf, and I refer back to it often. So I'd really like to dig into that a little bit more. But before we do, let's learn a little bit about you and SHATTR. So why did you create SHATTR? And I know we've had some offline conversations about this,
Right.
and it sounds to me like you and your co-founder, Marcia, had a bit of an aha moment during your careers, and you just decided, okay, let's team up and help female leaders stop sabotaging their own success. So what really brought you to that pivotal moment?
So Marcia and I founded Shatter because we saw an opportunity to really help women reach their full potential. And we realized that the journey for women is a bit different and it has its own unique challenges. So certainly there's the piece of that we can get in our own way, that there are some behaviors that don't really suit us well as we look to rise within an organization. So that's a part of it. And we do actually help women with that as part of the Shatter experience. It's a big part of it. The bigger vision was around really understanding the unique challenges women face in their leadership journey and helping to support those through community, through giving them tools and resources that can make all the difference in their ability to achieve the success they want, but also thrive during that journey. So the work is deeply personal for both me and Marcia. Marcia is a PhD psychology leadership development, and she spent several years in the corporate world. And then after that, she became certified as an executive coach and has coached many executives, mostly women. My background is in leading global sales, marketing, and human resources teams. And in that role, I had a front row seat to some of the challenges women face as they try and move up in an organization. And then there's the whole wellness thing, which is often absent from any of these programs as we're looking at supporting leaders in any organization, especially females. There is a component that has to do with well-being and the reality of our lives as females, and that often we go home to the second shift. And so we are caregivers. And the idea of the second shift is quite real. So looking at the challenge and the opportunity holistically, Marcia and I decided that there was a real opportunity to support women in a community space where we encourage and champion each other along the way. So that's how, through many conversations over the last year or so, Marcia and I decided to launch Shatter.
I think that's wonderful, and there's so much need for that. I was just reading a book recently that talked about how lonely leadership can be. And I think, to your point about building a community and bringing women together to support each other, that community aspect alone provides such value in a role where women or anyone can feel very isolated and alone. And I don't know how many women I've spoken to who've sacrificed either their career or their family. So it's almost like they felt like they had to choose between one or the other rather than balancing both and understanding what that balance looks like. So we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more, but I want to dig into the How Women Rise book because I think it relates a lot to the great work that you and Marcia do at SHATTR. So we obviously don't have time today to cover all 12 habits mentioned in the book.
I wish we did because plug for the book. It's a really great book, and I had read it years ago. And recently, as you know, because of everything we're doing with Shatter, it is so important.
The three that I chose were the disease to please, the perfection trap, and too much. So let's start with the disease to please. So the authors have observed that women who are constantly trying to please everyone at work and at home are finding themselves burned out. They suggest thinking very carefully about your priorities, not what would please others or would make everyone think you're the most wonderful person they've ever worked with, but what you want to be and achieve in your life. And honestly, just thinking of this question, I was just having a conversation with my husband a couple of hours ago about what I'm making for dinner tonight. Perfect example of pleasing, right? My 5-year-old has told me that he absolutely will not eat vegetables. He can't eat vegetables, according to him. And so I'm thinking about the dinner menu, and I told my husband, I was like, I cannot, to please my 5-year-old, I cannot make him separate meals every night. That's ridiculous. I'm going to burn myself out. So he's going to just have to deal with what's on the menu, and that's what it is. Because I also know mothers who will literally make 3 separate meals, one for each child, because this one doesn't like this and this one doesn't like that. And so I think you can easily go down that vicious spiral, and then all of a sudden you're making 3 meals every night and you're burned out.
Completely, completely. That's not sustainable.
No. So that's an at-home example. Obviously, there are at-work examples as well. But what have you observed with the women you coach, with this disease to please phenomenon?
Well, my first observation is that it is very common. I see it a lot, and women talk about it a lot. And what's really interesting is that for many women, I don't think it's, well, we all want to be liked, right? But I don't think it's just about wanting to be liked or avoiding contact. It runs much deeper than that. So from the time we were little girls, we were rewarded for being thoughtful and agreeable and helpful. So I'm sure you can think back to the time when you were young and at that age, and that was behavior that got rewarded. So it's really quite ingrained in us, and it's also sort of reinforced from, I think, a societal perspective. Women are often expected to step up and help each other out. So the problem is that these are not that these aren't important qualities, good qualities, great qualities. It's when we overuse them and when they get in the way of our priorities and what we want to do, what we need to achieve at work. So the thing that we work with women on a lot, I mean, I have in my own coaching, I'm a certified health and wellness coach. I left the corporate world for a bit. I got certified as an integrative health and wellness coach. And most of my clients, I would say 90% of my clients were executive women. And they came to me because they were about to burn out and or get sick. And
Mhm.
one of the things we talk about, and we talk about it within the Shatter experience, is the ability to set boundaries. And that saying no is not necessarily a bad thing. It's about making space to say yes to the things that actually align with your goals and values. And so often women will say yes to a lot of different opportunities because they don't want to let anybody down. They want to help people, and they also, for some, they want to become more visible in an organization. They want to get involved in cross-functional teams because more people will know them, and that's a really good thing. I mean, we can talk about that a little bit more because that's hard for a lot of women. So the intent is right. The problem is when they spread themselves so thin that they take away from the things that are really going to make a high impact in their role and what they need to accomplish for their organization. So I think it's quite common. It's not that these qualities are inherently bad. The ability to read other people, to be empathetic, to bring people together, these are leadership strengths. And in fact, in many workplaces that are focusing on engaging hearts and minds, these skills are more valuable than others. The problem is when women overuse them to the point that they prioritize pleasing others over their own career goals. And that's when they're at risk of burning out. So it's learning to set boundaries. It's learning to say no and understand that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it takes a lot of practice. Women are very uncomfortable with that. A lot of the women I have worked with are quite uncomfortable with that at the beginning until they understand that they can look at what I call a strategic yes framework, and that's helping them assess the opportunity as it compares to their long-term leadership vision. So if they have a long-term leadership vision, how they want to show up as a leader, where they want to be, the role they want to be in, the impact they want to have, then they can start to take some of these things that come their way. Will you do this? Can you join this? And look at it through that lens. And they find that to be very helpful.
Hmm. I love that idea of really setting that compass and that vision. Because if you don't have that, how do you align your priorities? Because you
That's
don't
right.
know what your internal compass is.
That's exactly right. And when you know your internal compass, when you understand your values, your purpose, and how you want to bring those into your leadership journey, then it can make all the difference in the world because you can, keep that rudder in the water and stay on track.
So, do you help women actually develop their own purpose statement?
We do. We do. We have a framework. It's called Get Clear, Get Free, Get Going. And the first part, Get Clear, is get clear on who you are as a person and a leader. Because who we are as a person ultimately impacts who we are as a leader. Understand your values. We help them with a values exercise. Your purpose, we do a purpose exercise. And then how do you bring those together to lead authentically? And also to lead from a place of strengths.
So that's great. And I'm a huge proponent of Clifton Strengths, and actually
Yes.
interviewed someone who's a Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach. So yeah, I think, really doing that initial self-reflection and really digging deep and understanding who you are as a person, knowing what your talents are, that can really set you down that very clear path of where you want to go. So I love how you set that foundation for women. So let's talk a little bit about another one of my favorite habits, which is the perfection trap. I actually interviewed a professor at the University of Chicago last year who authored a book called Flawed. He's also a psychologist and specializes in OCD. And so he's worked with both in the academic environment and also in the clinical environment, people who really struggle with perfectionism. And he sees how it translates to the workplace into really bad habits and counterproductive workplace environments. How do you see perfectionism manifest in the female leaders you coach, and how do you help them overcome it?
Oh boy. Okay. So I think perfectionism is without a doubt a big barrier to senior leadership roles. And it can serve women quite well at the beginning of their careers because, they are committed to excellence. They have high standards. They're paying attention to detail. They deliver. And that's what's a bit tricky about it because perfectionism can masquerade as really positive traits. But at a certain time, in your journey as your span of control becomes wider and your responsibility becomes deeper, it can actually have quite a paralyzing effect. And what that leads to in the workplace, I've noticed, is delaying decisions, um, holding on to reports, going over and over presentations that are really ready to go, are ready to fly. And so women can spend an awful lot of time um, being over prepared or considering every single risk or every which way this couldn't work out. And that time then takes away from their ability to move them and their team forward, to make progress, to make iterative progress. And the other thing that can happen is the desire to have things perfect can lead to the inability to delegate. And when you're an individual performer and you can spend as much time as you want on your job and we can put all the effort we want. We don't have a team that's waiting on us to make the decision to give the green light to go forward. But as you have a team and you become a leader and your team becomes larger and larger, people are waiting for you to give the green light to move forward. And it can ball up a whole bunch of work. So it's more about getting the quick wins, not missing the opportunities, and making progress. The other piece of this is that women can hold themselves to impossibly high standards and standards that they would never impart on their own team. they will hold for themselves, right? So I worked with a CFO, and her team was a bit frustrated. As I dug into what was happening, I realized that she would spend hours meticulously reviewing every detail of the work that was coming into her. So the team's reports and the information they were gathering and generating, and she would go over it and over it and over it. And to the point that she was holding everybody back, and they were afraid to make a move without her. And so when through conversation she understood that her need to micromanage to make sure everything was perfect was in fact creating so much frustration in her team and risking their deliverables. She finally was able to step back, and her team flourished. Like everybody ended up doing so well. And she realized that her job is to not make things perfect for her and her team. Her job was to develop a team that could do great work without her diving into all of the details. And when you're able to see that and turn that corner, it has an impact not on just on you, but on your team and your entire organization. So I have worked with lots of women that have had that aha moment when they step back and realize that they can't possibly seek the perfection that may have served them well earlier in their careers. So I'm all about the 85% rule. For me, it's if something is at 85% and it meets the key objectives, it's ready. Move forward. It's not about lowering standards. I don't think that we should lower the bar to the extent that we're doing sloppy work or work that is not going to meet the goals and the deadlines and the objectives. But more often than not, 85% is good enough.
I have that percentage in the back of my head as a reminder all the time because I, like many women, tend to fall in the perfectionism trap. And now that I'm moving into the world of being an entrepreneur, just like you, I'm realizing that I am everything. I am the finance person. I am the CEO. I am the marketing person. So if you fall into the perfectionism trap, wearing the entrepreneurial hat, there are other things that are just not going to get done. Whereas if you're sitting in a corporate role and you have one job function, you're an individual contributor, you could probably get away with perfectionism to a certain extent because you have the liberty and the time to really focus on one or two tasks. But yeah, once you start wearing multiple hats, you just don't have time for perfectionism. So you have to
No.
just be okay with that 85%. And I'm literally having to remind myself of that every day. It's a big transition.
Yeah, put a big, like, print it out, put it like on the wall opposite your desk, just put 85% because I think it makes such a difference in senior leadership for sure. Definitely entrepreneurship. You have to run fast. You have to try things. And then if it doesn't work, fix it. If you look at the entrepreneurs who are super successful, they get it out there and then they learn and then they tweak and they refine. And if you hold back, it can really cost you. Somebody else can make the same thing, get it out there first, and then get it better as they go along.
Absolutely. Great lesson to take away for all of us. You talked a little bit about perfectionism and detail orientation, and I think that dovetails really nicely into the last habit I want to cover, which is too much. I've had to work with mentors on this one extensively. And so the authors refer to the too much as in too many words, but also too many emotions. I tend to fall in the too many words category. I'm a very detail oriented person. And I found that in my corporate life, when I was still in the corporate world, I had difficulties tailoring my message, especially to really senior audiences who just want you to be brief, be bright, and be gone. I was okay, presenting to technical audiences like scientists who love the details and the data.
Okay.
But then I was basically giving the same content to the executive audience, which just literally just wanted a few bullets and to be done. So I think that piece was a really, as part of my mid-career aha moments, that was something that I really had to work on and fine tune. What have you experienced with working with women with either too many words or too many emotions?
I had to work on that too. That was something, I remember my first handful of board presentations, and you want to be able to tell them everything that's happening and the story behind it. One, there's a time limit, so you can't. You have to learn how to distill it into the essence of what's really important. And that is it's such a great exercise. I actually call that, it's a tool I call the power brief. And, so before any communication or meeting or pitch or even a difficult conversation with somebody on your team, challenge yourself to strip the message down to its most essential points, and then push yourself again to cut those words in half. And I find that every time there's more power, there's more clarity, the message lands stronger. And so I love that notion of the power brief. And it's something I really had to work on. I love words. I love words. I have a big attention span. I can read a lot of words. I still read a lot of books. A lot of people have decided that they don't have time for books anymore, but I love words. And so I really, really had to work on that. And one of the things that helped me was knowing that the average woman speaks 20,000 words a day. And for men, it's about 7,000 words. And so when I'm presenting to a room, frankly, full of men, I was for years the only woman in the C-suite. I had to remember that there's just a gender difference there in the amount of words that we use. And also, nobody cares about all the details. So the notion of too much, I mean, they care that I know the details and I'm going to take care of them, but they don't want me to waste their time going through all the details. So it's also something that I really worked on. And I've helped a lot of women in their careers. I had a director of marketing that worked on my team. She was absolutely brilliant as a marketer. She was incredible. And but she, in all of her presentations, she gave the backstory and all the details. And so by the time she would get to her key point, the really important information she wanted everybody to learn, know, and take away, people had checked out. So she was really open to the feedback and started doing a power brief before her presentations and realized how much more engaged everybody was. So that was a huge turning point for her and just a great exercise for everybody in general, I think. We work with the women in Shatter about, you don't have to tell the whole story. Tell the part of the story that this audience needs to hear at this time. And that's a good framework to help people through that. The other part of it is the emotional part, and women express too much emotion in corporate America. I think that's an interesting one because when it comes to emotions, there's an undeniable double standard. So every leader has emotion, but women are often judged more harshly for expressing it. And our emotion tends to show, as females, it tends to show as frustration or anxiety. For men, it more often tends to show as anger, I think. But we are held more accountable for reining it in. On the other hand, we don't want to, we're sort of counseled, don't show too much emotion, don't show too much emotion. But if you don't show any emotion, it sort of doesn't enhance your message or convey your passion for what is happening. So I think it's a really fine line. I think it's understanding when to be emotionally appropriate. I think expressing emotion is something we should do, as long as our message isn't lost in the emotion that's carrying it. And I think that's what makes the difference. And so it's just to be careful about that and understand that women express our emotions a bit differently, and that corporate organizations are still very much set on a standard that was created for centuries by males, and especially at the top, at the leadership levels. And so just to understand that that's where the behavior and the expectations have been routed in and have been for a very long time. And understanding that dynamic, I think, can make a big difference too.
I think it is a very fine line because I'm seeing more and more literature, management books talking about leaders needing to understand emotional intelligence and be able to tap into their authenticity and vulnerability. And this is not just addressing women, right? It's just any leader. But then I've also experienced leading strongly with empathy. And of course, this podcast is all about empathy in the workplace. I've also experienced where I've actually burned myself out caring too much. A specific example where I've
Right.
actually led people through change, and I put so much care into it that it was starting to take a toll on my health because I was basically feeling what other people were feeling going through that change. So it's almost like you have to find that balance of, yes, show empathy, show you care, show your passion for the vision and where you're taking your team or your company, but also take care of yourself and preserve, that energy that you have for yourself, because you can't ultimately literally feel everything that everyone else is feeling all the time, or you will literally get exhausted. I'm still learning what that balance is, MJ. I mean, I'm sure you have women who you're coaching who are struggling with, when do I show emotion? When do I not? Um, in what context and what not? How much energy, what energy do I put into it versus how much do I hold back so I still have energy when I come home and take care of my family and their emotions? So there's just a lot of things that you have to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I love that you said is one of the more important things is how to protect your own energy and protect yourself along the way, and not take too much on. Whether it's the person that comes down the hall on a daily basis and wants to dump on you and you feel like you're being kind and supportive, but is that the best use of your time? Is that the best way to support them by letting them vent to you on a daily basis? I think in terms of showing emotion, it's always appropriate for the people you work with for them to know that you care. Caring is being kind and showing up and being present with people, and that's always something that I think that we should display. But protecting ourselves from uh, being an emotional dumping ground or dealing with toxic emotions in the workplace is something that's really important work, and it affects our well-being. And I think it goes back to why I've worked with over the years so many women who are on the verge of complete burnout or getting really sick, because they're taking it on and taking it on and taking it on, and don't take care of themselves first, or not prioritizing themselves emotionally, mentally, or physically. And it's really important because your team needs you, your family needs you. We have to put ourselves first. And we often have the tendency to put everybody else first. And not all the time. Things go in waves and flows. You talked earlier about balance. I tend to talk about work-life harmony. I think balance is really challenging because if you think about a seesaw, to keep it balanced, like it's constant work on either end. Nobody's just sitting there keeping it balanced. It's constant work back and forth, and it's always going out of balance, and you try and bring it back in. And when I think about it as harmony instead, it's about, sometimes your work has to take priority. You've got a big deadline, closing on a huge deal. Work has to be front and center. Sometimes family needs to take priority because your child is in some big show and you want to get them to the rehearsals and the show and all of that. And so it's understanding that there's a rhythm to it that's actually quite natural, and it's all okay. But through that, as long as we continue to think of ourselves and our own priorities and needs and make sure those get met, because the people around us need us to be whole and well and thriving. And a thriving leader has an enormously positive impact on their organization, just as a leader that's unwell and not balanced has a very strong impact the other way on an organization. So we owe it to the people that we work with and the ones that we love in our lives to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think you made a really good point about role modeling. I don't know how many people I've interviewed so far where this comes up over and over again. Role modeling who you would like your team to be and represent. So showing that you are taking care of yourself. I remember interviewing someone a while back who would bring a medicine ball to her desk, and she would do yoga at lunch hour. And that the example she was setting for her team, right? So they were seeing her do this, and then they were thinking, oh, this is okay. My boss is doing this, so I can do this too. And she's taking care of her health. I should take care of mine. So I don't think we also really quite realize how much, if we're leading a team of people, how much our behavior impacts their behavior and their well-being, simply by role modeling what we think a leader should, how.
1,000%. Yeah. Yeah. The impact that one person focusing on their own health, their wellness, taking care of themselves has on everybody around them is absolutely profound. It lifts everybody, and it's a great way to role model.
I know we were talking about a lot of habits. No, I'd really like to dig into something that I found really interesting in a recent conversation that I had with you, MJ. And you had said that in conversations with female leaders who go through your cohorts and shatter, that many of them say, "Ah, I wish I had learned these skills earlier in my career. It would have helped me so much, like propelled me much further." I mean, what would you say is the biggest skill set missing mid-career and that middle management level where women tend to get stuck?
The ability to self advocate.
Mm.
So, what's interesting about it is this is hard work for a lot of women. Um, so when women come join Shatter, they're with us for a year, and there are lots of things that we work on. Some of these, like what's getting in our own way, the 12 habits from the book that we've been talking about, are a great example. And so it's building awareness about that and putting together a plan to leave some of those habits behind. The one that women have a very hard time with is strategic self advocacy, talking themselves up, connecting with people outside their sort of immediate team and letting them know what they're doing. And women see this as sometimes like being ego fueled or political. And they don't like that. And honestly, I understand, because I always felt like I was not a political machine in what can become very political organizations. And then I realized that it's part of like sort of getting out there, talking to people about what you're doing, understanding what they're doing is a healthy thing to do to advance your career. And a lot of women think, and I think this also goes back to when we were in school. I was a really good student. I'm sure you were. I sat down on my desk and I put my head down and I did my work. And I handed things in when they were supposed to be. So it's just this thing like, and I got good grades. And so it's this notion of just put your head down and do good work and you'll be rewarded. It's not good grades, but the next job. And it actually, it just doesn't work that way, because you're in an environment where a lot of people are putting themselves out there, mostly men, but there are some women that are very good at it too. And they're telling people what they're doing, and they're becoming more and more comfortable connecting with senior leaders above them in the organization, and they're becoming visible. So we do a whole session in Shatter on enhancing visibility. We start with a visibility map. How visible are you right now? And then, put in place key strategies to move forward and increase and enhance your visibility. So many women, they're so capable, super successful, and they have a hard time showcasing their wins and talking about their talent. And so it's something that needs practice, and we encourage that, and we encourage them to talk about the progress that they're making in this respect, because it keeps it alive, and you need to keep it alive. It's not like one day you just say, okay, I'm going to become more comfortable talking about the great work I'm doing. It doesn't happen like that. It's a small conversation first, and then a bigger one and a bigger one. But when people are looking at who to promote, um, you can be doing a stellar job, but if you're not known and your work is not known and the depths of what's been happening in your organization are not known, you're likely to get looked over. So that, I think, is one of the most important things women could get comfortable with, is advocating for themselves and making themselves more visible and building their network of people that know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how many women I've spoken to who kind of feel that that activity feels a little gross, or it's self-aggrandizing. I always looked at networking and that kind of strategic networking, as I always called it, as a way to learn. So I was basically redesigning the story I told myself, because I also initially thought it was gross, because I never wanted to play the political games in corporate. But I would strategically look at people across the organization outside my typical department, who I could learn from and who I could also maybe add some value to whatever work they're doing. And I would set up a call as like a learning session. And then it didn't feel gross, because I had some value that I felt I could give to this person, and they had something I could learn, and then the exchange started from there. So I think reframing the story could also help women get over that hump.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you did it. And it's true, right? You weren't telling yourself something that wasn't true. We can always, every exchange is an opportunity to learn and grow. And so we can learn, whoever we're talking with, what is your role? What are you working on? What are your challenges? That's a huge growth opportunity for us. And at the same time, then we get to talk to them about what we're doing. And that's a wonderful way to get past. I love that you use growth, but it's just a wonderful way to move away from, this actually isn't gross. This is something, if I care about my career, it's something that I actually need to learn how to do. And everything with practice you can get good at. Public speaking. People are more afraid of public speaking than dying. But all good public speakers will tell you it just takes practice. I remember the first time I had to speak in front of a group. Oh my God, I was awful. And the next time and the next time, you get better and better and better and better, until one day you're speaking in front of a group of 1,000 people, and it's nothing, right? So practice helps with everything, and this is an area where women can really focus on practicing, and it could make all the difference in the world for them in terms of their career journey, not just where they end up, if they want to go to the top, or if they want to just, have a huge impact on what they're doing and the position that they're in. Learning how to advocate for yourself is just critical.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate the work you're doing in helping women really see their own value and putting themselves out there. The work you're doing is needed so much, and I'm sure you've made such an impact on the women who have been through your cohorts already. And I hope you can continue to attract more women into those cohorts, so we can watch women shatter their own glass ceilings, because that's what it's really all about, right? We tend to be inhibitors of our own success more than any other external factors. So if we start with that, we can already make a big difference in creating more balanced workplace with both women and men at the helm.
Absolutely. There are things that we can change and things we can't. But we can change our behaviors and habits and really take a good look at them. And we can listen to our mind monsters, we call them, that internal dialogue that we have going all the time that holds us back. And it does. And so many of our thoughts are repetitive from the day before, and they're at a subconscious level. And it's tuning into that and really understanding, like, what are we telling ourselves every day? What are we afraid of? What is holding us back? And we can change that. We have the power to change that in a way that can make all of the difference in our personal and professional success. So that's a really important one, is to just tune into, what is that inner critic saying? How is that holding me back? Let it go. Somebody said recently, let your inner voice outside. And I loved that saying. And what she meant by it is, instead of letting it circulate up here, driving us crazy and holding us back, just share it with a friend. Oh my gosh, I can't keep, I'm talking to myself about, I'm doing it. Just share it with your friend, because your good friends are going to be like, that's crazy. Why are you talking to yourself that way? Right. So I so love that. Let your inner voice outside. That resonated with me.
Unleash the demon inside your own mind. I That's such good advice, and yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap up this conversation with an action for everyone out there listening. What are you telling yourself every day? What is that internal dialogue? And if it is, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, let's rethink. And I think the other thing that we should think about too is, whatever we're saying to ourselves, would we say that to our partner? Would we say that to our
Right.
friend? Probably
Never.
not.
Right.
So let's be kinder to ourselves. That's a great place to start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can be very, very hard on ourselves. And women tend to beat themselves up more than men, over and over and over, and ruminate. If I said something that went wrong in a meeting, we go back to it over and over and over, and just let it go. Learning to not only stop the inner dialogue, but also just let it go and move forward. It would serve us all really well. And I know I've been quite guilty of that along the way.
We all have. We all have. Let's continue to work on that. Thank you again for joining me today, MJ. This was a really enlightening conversation. I feel inspired after having this dialogue with you, and I love the work that you're doing. So thanks again for being here today.
Thank you. Absolutely my pleasure.
This podcast is designed to help busy business leaders create an inspired and engaged workforce. I am building a community of like-minded leaders and experts who all share the same passion, taking care of people at work. Whether you are a blue-collar worker or white-collar worker, small business owner or corporate executive, you belong in this community. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you know someone who I should interview or should be a part of this community, please connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.